Now, preview time. So let's take a look at what's coming your way.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another brand new installment of Albumversearies, the show that goes track by track on albums that are celebrating an anniversary. Now, today's entry isn't actually an album per se, it's an EP, an extended play. EPs generally contain more tracks than a single, but fewer than an album. Going forth, I probably won't do a whole lot of EPs. However, I felt it was important to do the ones celebrating an albumversary today, as it ties to some very important moments in music history, namely the breakup of the original incarnation of Van Halen. Crazy from the Heat is the EP in question by the original frontman of Van Halen, David Lee Roth. Released on this day in 1985, this was Roth's debut solo recording, and it was released while he was still technically the lead singer for the band. Sadly, he parted ways with Van Halen several weeks later and launched a solo career. The EP contains 4 songs, all of which are covers, and a decidedly dissimilar style from Roth's previous work with Van Halen. Now I'm going to do this EP a little bit different from my other Albumversary videos. Traditionally, I go track by track in the order of the album. However, for this one, I'm going to save the song that led to the Roth-Van Halen split for last. Side 1, Song 1, is a track called Easy Street, which was originally done by the Edgar Winter Group, who are probably best known for their songs Frankenstein and Free Ride. The song kicks off with some very standard 80s synthesizer keyboards before the drums kick in, and it features some fantastic saxophone work by Edgar Winter himself. Winter also provides the keyboards, synthesizer, and backing vocals for the song. It's a definite toe tapper, to be sure. The second song on side 1 is the medley of Just a Gigolo and I Ain't Got Nobody, which are 2 pre-World War II songs. Just a Gigolo dates back to the late 1920s and is a tune that was originally written by Leonello Casucci in 1928 to lyrics that were written by Julius Brammer in 1924. Irving Caesar would then translate the German lyrics into English in 1929. For I Ain't Got Nobody, there are varying claims as to who truly wrote the song. For example, there are 2 copyrights from 1911, one attributed to Clarence Brandon and one to Billy Smythe, both of whom were musicians in the St. Louis, Missouri area. If true, this would be the first version of the words and music to I Ain't Got Nobody. Now, Chicago and St. Louis ragtime pianist and blues composer Charles Warfield claims to have originally written the song in April of 1914, as a copyright attributes Warfield as the composer, David Young as the lyricist, and Marie Lucas as the arranger. This version of the song is titled I Ain't Got Nobody and Nobody Cares for Me. Meanwhile, a copyright entry from 1916 under a shorter title attributes the composition to Davy Payton and Spencer Williams, and the lyrics to publisher Roger Graham. Regardless of all of that, in 1916, Frank K. Root and Company, a Chicago publisher, acquired the Craig and Company copyright, and later that year also acquired the Warfield Young copyright. However, the most famous version, and the one that Roth covered, was made famous by Louis Prima in 1956. I, of course, know Prima best for his animated portrayal of King Louie in the Walt Disney film The Jungle Book from 1967. Prima started pairing the songs back in 1945, and the idea was revisited in the popular arrangement in a new jumpin' jivin' style that was created by Sam Boutra for Prima's 1950s Las Vegas stage show. The success of that act gained Prima a recording deal with Capitol Records, which aimed to capture on record the atmosphere of Prima's shows. Prima's first album with Capitol, entitled The Wildest, was released in November of 1956, and the album opened with Just a Gigolo, I Ain't Got Nobody, which then became Prima's signature number and helped to relaunch his career. David Lee Roth's version peaked at number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and was the second single from the EP. Dave's version brings Edgar Winter back for keyboards, synthesizers, saxophone, and backing vocals, and Dave's version is a fun, up-tempo party song. As we go to side 2 of the album, we're going to skip Song 1, go to Song 2 of the EP, and it's called Coconut Grove, written by John Sebastian and originally performed by his band, The Lovin' Spoonful. The song features Dean Parks on guitar and film composer James Newton Howard on synthesizer. Howard was fresh off of scoring David Lynch's Dune before contributing to this song. He would then go on to score such notable films as Major League, Pretty Woman, My Girl, The Prince of Tides, The Fugitive, Glengarry Glen Ross, Space Jam, Liar Liar, My Best Friend's Wedding, The Devil's Advocate, Runaway Bride, The Sixth Sense, and so many others. And I just covered the greatest hits from the 80s and 90s. The opening guitar riff for Coconut Grove is very reminiscent, at least to me, of Rainbow Connection. I wonder if Paul Williams, who wrote Rainbow Connection, was inspired by this song when he was writing the chord changes. Take a listen to the two songs and let me know what you think. I think Dean Parks does a masterful job with the guitar work here, as it really complements David Lee Roth's vocals, as his voice has a very dreamy quality to it on the song. Very soothing, very melodic. If you haven't figured it out by now, it was track 1 of side 2 that ultimately led to the breakup of Van Halen. David Lee Roth's cover of the Beach Boys classic, California Girls. As the story goes, on September 2nd, 1984, Van Halen played their very last show together, the Monsters of Rock Festival in Nuremberg, Germany. Afterwards, there was supposed to be a short break before they returned to the studio to record their follow-up to what is now their classic record, 1984. It's what happened on that plane ride home that would change the trajectory of music history. During the flight, David Lee Roth played Eddie Van Halen a cassette of a demo of him covering the legendary Beach Boys song, California Girls. See, over the past few years, Dave had been irritated that Eddie was working on projects outside of the band, specifically appearing on Michael Jackson's song, Beat It. For those that don't know, he played the guitar solo. So Dave came up with an idea to do something on his own with producer Ted Templeman. Dave figured he would record just a few cover songs for a solo project, while Eddie composed music in his 5150 studio for the next Van Halen album. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, the problem was Eddie hated Dave's demo of California Girls when he first heard it, which enraged Roth, causing a huge argument between the two men. This, coupled with other factors that had been causing friction between the two bandmates for the last couple of years, would result in Roth eventually taking the steps to leave the band. Now, it's not certain when Roth decided that he no longer wanted to be in Van Halen, but he would record the song California Girls in order to officially kick off his solo career. In fact, David Lee Roth would recruit Carl Wilson to arrange the song and sing backing vocals, along with Carl's good friend, Christopher Cross. The timing could not have been better, especially since at the time, Roth was one of the biggest music stars in the world, and his cover of the song introduced the music of the Beach Boys to a whole new generation of fans. The timing was also perfect for Carl Wilson because the Beach Boys were recording what would become their self-titled 1985 album, which was to be released just a few months after this cover song became a huge hit. So it definitely helped MTV to embrace the video for the song Get Ya Back, which ended up getting solid airplay, making that song a surprise hit. Dave's version of California Girls would become a huge success, peaking at number 3 just as the original Beach Boys song had done some 20 years earlier. Yet at this point, Dave was still saying that his solo career was just a side project and that he was still a member of Van Halen. However, with continued friction with Eddie and his solo career making him one of the biggest rock stars on the planet, it's understandable why those close to him and his own personal ego made him feel that he no longer needed to be a member of the band to remain popular and relevant in the music world. Eventually, the enormous success of the songs California Girls and Just a Gigolo, as well as the EP Going Platinum, coupled with Dave's desire to pursue an acting career, would solidify his decision to leave Van Halen, making it official that he was not coming back. Unfortunately for Carl Wilson, he was very disappointed that the self-titled 1985 Beach Boys album didn't perform better on the charts, and it made him realize after years of denial that sadly, most music fans only wanted to see the Beach Boys as a nostalgia act. But then again, Kokomo would become a #1 song 3 years later. Just more proof that the music business and the legacy of the Beach Boys is always unpredictable. As for Van Halen, even though David Lee Roth would reunite with Eddie and Alex Van Halen, the original lineup of the band with Michael Anthony would never play on a concert stage again. And now that Eddie Van Halen is no longer with us, September 2nd, 1984 will always be known as the very last time that the original members of one of America's greatest and most iconic bands ever played live together. It's a travesty when you really think about it, because Van Halen had done covers on their albums in the past, most famously their covers of You Really Got Me, Pretty Woman, and Dancing in the Street. There is no reason why, in my opinion, with a little Van Halen touch or twist to California Girls, it couldn't have been the lead single for what would be their next album. A little compromise goes a long way. That being said, there's definitely a reason why it was the first single from the EP, a reason why it's the standout track, and a reason why it went to #3 on Billboard's Hot 100. Then you factor in the backing vocals provided by Edgar Winter once again, along with Christopher Cross and Carl Wilson, one of the founding members of the Beach Boys. The harmonies are on point with the original recording. Personally, I love the David Lee Roth version of California Girls as much as, if not maybe more, than the original Beach Boys version. What do you guys think? Is David Lee Roth's version better or worse? Do you think that there's a way that the plane ride could have gone in a way that would have helped to have saved what was arguably the most popular rock band of the time? Let's chat about that in the comments below. Now, as if that isn't bad enough, the success of David Lee Roth's cover of California Girls is what planted the seed in Mike Love's head to go after his songwriting credits for many of the Beach Boys' songs. Think about this for a moment, shall we? For all of his success as a songwriter for the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson had very little success with his songs outside of the band, and even less success with other artists covering those songs. Whereas songwriters like Bob Dylan, Paul McCartney, Burt Bacharach, and Barry Gibb have had tremendous success with other artists covering their songs and spiking the values of their songwriting publishing, Brian Wilson was never that fortunate. And the ultimate proof of that was the fact that Murray Wilson, Brian, Carl, and Dennis Wilson's father, sold Brian's songs in 1969 for a very low sum of money because there was literally no market value for them at the time. Granted, Brian did have some success, especially with Surf City, which went to #1 early on for Jan and Dean. And if we're being honest, pretty much just sounded like a Beach Boys song. But after that, there is really no cover of a Brian Wilson song, nor any original song that he wrote for another artist that had that type of impact on the charts. Even with many popular artists and bands covering the Beach Boys' songs. That would all change in 1985 when David Lee Roth decided to cover California Girls in order to kick off his solo career. It not only was very successful by peaking inside the top 5 at #3, just as the original had done 20 years ago, like I previously had mentioned, but it also made Brian Wilson, and only Brian Wilson, a shit ton of money from the songwriting royalties, because at the time, he was the only one credited as the sole writer of the song. For many years prior to that, Mike Love had told anybody that would listen how he had been screwed out of getting credit and songwriting royalties by his uncle Murray Wilson by not allowing his name to be added to the songwriting credits on Beach Boys singles and albums. However, up until that point, he had never done anything about it. With the success of David Lee Roth's cover of California Girls, however, Love saw the type of money that songwriting could pay in royalties. And that meant that it was now a whole new ballgame. Not only with artists who covered the Beach Boys songs, but also the money now being generated from the huge sales of their compilation records. This event would plant the seed in Mike Love's head that it was now time to find a way to get the official songwriting credit for California Girls and many of the other compositions that he claimed to have co-written, which according to him was never given credit for. Years later, once Brian Wilson's caretaker manager, Eugene Landy, came up with the master plan to sue the company, Irving Music, which is the division of A&M Records that Murray Wilson had sold the Beach Boys publishing to in the late 60s, to get that publishing back, the lawsuit wasn't successful, but Brian was awarded a $10 million settlement. As Mike Love stated in his autobiography, quote, Brian and his associates promised to compensate me with my rightful songwriting credits and royalties if I helped and supported Brian's lawsuit in order to get the publishing back. However, once Brian was awarded the settlement, he wouldn't return my calls. Therefore, the lawsuit was necessary. End quote. Mike would end up going to court and winning that lawsuit, which ended up giving him songwriting credit for over 35 of the Beach Boys songs. He would also get 30% of the $10 million settlement that Brian received from Irving Music. And from that point onward, his name would be included on the songwriting credits for songs like California Girls, Wouldn't It Be Nice, I Get Around, and many others. The move was also one of the most profitable lawsuits of all time, since Mike Love now gets songwriting royalties to many of the most popular Beach Boys songs that are now used in everything from commercials to movies, to the sale of the back catalog in compilations and original albums, especially now that the Beach Boys and their legacy has been re-examined, which has led to a whole new generation of fans. As a result, Mike Love is now one of the wealthiest living musicians on the planet. Now, bringing things back to Crazy from the Heat, I give the EP a 9 out of 10. I think it was a great coming out party for David Lee Roth as a solo artist. It contains great song selections as far as the covers that were chosen, and I still, to this day, wonder what could have been had that flight home gone differently. And instead of hating on the track, Eddie had agreed to work it onto the next Van Halen album. What do you, the viewers, think? Do you guys agree? Let me know. Leave your thoughts in the comments section, and let's engage in some fun banter about the universal language, music. I want to thank everybody for joining me here for another Albumverseary right here on the Casa D18 Studios YouTube channel. I, of course, am your host, the Renegade J.J. Williams. And until we celebrate our next Albumverseary, I'll catch you guys later.